The Gilded Cage. The persistent chirping of her phone, a tinny insistent sound against the pre-dawn quiet, dragged Chloe from a dream of sun-drenched fields and the scent of honeysuckle. It was 4:30 a.m. Outside her window, the city was still a charcoal sketch, barely stirring. She slapped the alarm into silence, the residual warmth of sleep instantly replaced by the familiar chill of the apartment. Every morning began this way, a battle against inertia, a mental checklist already spooling in her mind. Shower, coffee, a quick scan of her nursing textbooks, just a few pages, whatever she could squeeze in, then the bus. Her reflection in the steamed up bathroom mirror showed eyes that held a permanent fatigue, but also a stubborn spark. She ran a hand through her short, practical curls, splashing cold water on her face to shock herself awake. The scent of instant coffee mingled with the faint, sweet smell of the jasmine soap she splurged on once a month. It was a small luxury, a reminder that even in this relentless grind, moments of grace could be found. The commute to the diner, her first job, was a blur of half-empty buses and the city slowly coming to life. Delivery trucks rumbling, the first tentative calls of street vendors. She worked a 4-hour shift there, just enough to cover rent and a fraction of her tuition. Then another bus, another change of clothes in a cramped locker room, and the stark transition to the polished, hushed world of the Gilded Spoon. The Gilded Spoon was a different beast altogether. Nestled in a more affluent part of town, it catered to a clientele who valued discretion and a certain old-world elegance. The air inside was perpetually cool, smelling of aged leather, expensive coffee, and the faint metallic tang of money. Chloe smoothed down the crisp white apron over her black uniform, her posture instinctively straightening as she stepped onto the main floor. The light fixtures, intricate affairs of brass and frosted glass, cast a warm, deceptive glow over everything, including Mr. Henderson. He was already there, a squat, balding man with eyes like polished stones and a perpetually downturned mouth. He stood by the matron's podium, fussing with a stack of menus, his tailored suit jacket straining across his shoulders. He didn't look up as Chloe approached, but she felt his presence, a cold, watchful weight. "Davis," he grunted, not a greeting, but an acknowledgement of her existence. He didn't call any of the other waitstaff by their last names. "Running a little close, aren't we?" Chloe checked the wall clock. 10:58 a.m. Her shift started at 11. "No, Mr. Henderson, I'm on time." Her voice was even, betraying none of the irritation that tightened her stomach. He finally looked at her, a faint, unpleasant smile playing on his lips. "Just making sure, Davis. Punctuality is the cornerstone of service, wouldn't you agree?" He adjusted a menu with exaggerated slowness, then flicked his wrist towards a table in the corner. "Table 5 is yours, and try to look a little less tired today. Yes? Our patrons expect a certain level of enthusiasm." The microaggressions were a daily ritual, a slow drip of poison designed to chip away at her composure. He never yelled, never directly insulted, but his words were always edged with a condescending politeness that was far more insidious. Chloe simply nodded, her expression unreadable. She walked towards table 5, her spine rigid, the familiar mantra playing in her head. Just get through the shift. Just get through the shift. Table 5 was Mr. Kim's table. He was a regular, a fixture in the restaurant's quiet mornings. He always sat in the same spot, by the tall arched window, overlooking a meticulously manicured garden. He was a man of quiet habits and even quieter demeanor. Today he was already there, a dark, impeccably tailored suit, a pristine white shirt, and a tie the color of midnight. His silver hair was meticulously combed, and his hands, long and elegant, rested on the linen tablecloth beside a half-empty glass of water. He rarely spoke more than a few words. "Black coffee, please," or "thank you." His eyes, dark and intelligent, missed nothing. He had a way of observing without staring, a stillness that made him seem both intensely present and utterly detached. Chloe had learned to appreciate his quiet presence. He was never demanding, always polite, and often left a generous tip, folded neatly beneath his cup. As she approached, he met her gaze for a fleeting moment, a silent acknowledgement. There was no warmth, no animosity, just a profound, assessing calm. Chloe offered a small professional smile. Good morning, Mr. Kim. The usual. He nodded once, a barely perceptible movement. Please, Miss Davis. His voice was low, resonant, with a faint, almost musical accent that Chloe couldn't quite place. She poured his coffee, the rich aroma momentarily masking the stale scent of Henderson's disapproval. As she set the cup down, she caught a glimpse of a small, intricate tattoo peeking from beneath his cuff, a stylized dragon, its scales appearing almost lifelike. It was gone in an instant, covered as he subtly shifted his arm. Throughout the morning, Chloe moved with practiced efficiency, refilling water glasses, taking orders, navigating the delicate dance of high-end service. Henderson hovered, a shadow at the periphery, occasionally calling out a sharp instruction to another waiter, or glaring pointedly at Chloe if he thought she was moving too slowly, or, in his words, lacking sparkle. Once, as she cleared a neighboring table, she overheard him speaking to a new fresh-faced hostess. Remember, dear, presentation is everything. Our clientele expects a certain refinement. We want to cultivate an atmosphere of understated elegance, not commonness. His gaze, she felt, flickered in her direction, though he quickly averted it. Chloe tightened her grip on the tray. Commonness. The word hung in the air, a thinly veiled insult. She took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her react. She was better than his petty cruelty. She had dreams, ambitions that stretched far beyond the gilded spoon and Henderson's stifling ego. Nursing school, a life of purpose, helping people, that was her future. This was just a necessary temporary stop. From his table, Mr. Kim, sipping his coffee, watched it all. His eyes, though seemingly focused on the street outside, took in the subtle shifts in Chloe's posture, the way her shoulders tensed, the almost imperceptible clenching of her jaw. He observed Henderson's posturing, the almost theatrical way he adjusted his tie, the dismissive gestures. Nothing was overt, but the undercurrents of the room were as clear to him as the morning light streaming through the window. He noted the way Henderson meticulously avoided eye contact with Chloe, even as he spoke about refinement. He noted the careful, almost defiant way Chloe carried herself, a quiet dignity that refused to be diminished. He finished his coffee, a faint ring left on the white saucer. He didn't rush, nor did he linger. When Chloe approached to present the bill, he simply nodded, pulling a crisp $100 bill from his wallet. "Keep the change, Miss Davis," he said, his voice as smooth and unyielding as polished stone. As Chloe processed the payment, her fingers brushed the warm bill. It was a generous tip, as always. She placed the change on the small silver tray, but Mr. Kim waved it away. "For your dedication, Miss Davis." His eyes, for a brief, intense moment, met hers. There was something in their depth, a fleeting flash of understanding, perhaps even empathy. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual stoic calm. He rose from the table, a man of quiet power, and walked towards the exit without a backward glance. Chloe watched him go, a strange sense of something unsettled stirring within her. She didn't know what it was, but Mr. Kim always left behind a lingering impression, like a perfectly struck chord that continued to resonate long after the sound had faded. She turned back to her duties, the metallic clink of coins in her pocket a small comfort, a small victory against the grinding reality of her day. The gilded spoon, for all its oppressive atmosphere, was still a means to an end. For now. Friday night rush. The gilded spoon pulsed with a distinct Friday night intensity, a frantic hum that awakened just after 6 and wouldn't subside until the final dessert spoon met porcelain. Tonight was no exception. Every table teemed with guests, a tapestry woven from hushed confidences, the delicate clink of cutlery, and sporadic bursts of mirth. The air hung thick with the mingled aromas of seared scallops and costly perfumes, a fragrant testament to the restaurant's lavish reputation. Chloe wove through the orchestrated chaos with innate grace, her dark uniform a swift current against the opulent backdrop of mahogany and gold. Her tray, crowned with a shimmering tower of water glasses, seemed to defy gravity as she navigated the narrow passages between diners. She greeted an anniversary celebration with a radiant smile, then seamlessly pivoted to a first date couple, offering the evening's special with genuine warmth. An excellent selection, madam, she affirmed, setting down a plate of pan-seared duck breast before a woman whose diamond necklace caught the chandelier's gleam. The chef's cherry reduction is truly inspired this evening. A few tables away, a gentleman delicately blotted his mouth with a linen napkin. This young woman, he remarked to his companion, a subtle hand gesture indicating Chloe as she refilled their water. Remarkably efficient, wouldn't you agree? And so agreeable. His companion offered a nod of accord and a small appreciative smile to Chloe. She acknowledged the compliment with a polite dip of her head, her internal rhythm undisturbed. Her focus remained sharp, her mind a finely tuned instrument anticipating needs, tracking orders, and meticulously mapping her next movements. Dirty dishes vanished as if by conjuring, new courses materialized with balletic precision, and forgotten bread baskets appeared without prompting. She wasn't merely serving, she was conducting a silent symphony within the bustling dining room. From his post by the maitre d' stand, Mr. Henderson observed her. His gaze was unyielding, a cold, analytical appraisal that seemed to strip away the very fabric of her composure. He noted the subtle sheen of sweat at her temples, the faint flush on her cheeks, the way her shoulders, though held straight, bore the cumulative strain of the shift. He also registered the easy smiles she drew from patrons, the casual compliments, and a faint, almost imperceptible tightening around his lips betrayed his thoughts. It was as if her competence, her quiet dignity amidst relentless demands, grated on him. He preferred his staff visibly flustered, prone to cracking under pressure, confirming his unspoken conviction of their inherent inadequacy. With Chloe, that satisfaction was a rare commodity. He pushed off the stand, strolling languidly past a table where Chloe was jotting a dessert order. "Davis," he murmured, his voice low enough to avoid disturbing the diners, yet sharp enough to cut through the ambient din. "Table 4 requires more bread. It's been empty for 10 minutes. Are we perhaps losing our touch or merely neglecting our fundamental duties?" Chloe didn't miss a beat. "Of course, Mr. Henderson," she replied, her voice even, her eyes meeting his for a fleeting second before she turned to retrieve the bread. She knew table 4 had just been seated and had been offered bread moments ago by another server, but argument was futile, a drain on the precious energy needed to navigate the night. She simply did as she was told, a fresh basket appearing at table 4 within seconds. Mr. Kim, a solitary figure amidst the animated crowd, observed the exchange from his usual corner table. He had arrived shortly after 7, his dark suit impeccable, his eyes missing nothing. He'd witnessed Chloe's graceful ballet through the evening, the effortless manner in which she handled demanding patrons and seemingly impossible requests. He'd also registered Henderson's hovering presence, the manager's almost predatory scrutiny of Chloe. Mr. Kim had encountered that particular look before, in varying contexts, but the underlying sentiment remained constant: a desire to diminish, to assert dominance. He noticed the subtle clenching of Chloe's jaw as she passed Henderson, the almost imperceptible tightening of her hand on her order pad. She was a professional, beyond doubt, but even the strongest steel could show strain under constant pressure. He took a sip of his Cabernet, his gaze thoughtful, a silent witness to the unfolding drama beneath the gilded spoon's glittering chandeliers. The restaurant throbbed around him, a microcosm of ambition, service, and veiled power dynamics, and he, Mr. Kim, was watching it all. The generous table, the gilded spoon, even on a Friday, had its ebb and flow. The initial dinner rush had subsided into a comfortable hum, a softer clinking of cutlery, a more measured cadence of conversation. Chloe, however, knew the comfort was a mirage. There was always another wave, another challenge. Tonight's challenge arrived in the form of table 7, a party of 8, boisterous and well-dressed, clearly celebrating something significant. She approached with her usual calm efficiency, her notepad already open. "Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Gilded Spoon. My name is Chloe, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Her voice was clear, perfectly pitched to carry over the jovial chatter without being intrusive. The group leader, a woman with a cascade of silver hair and a laugh that seemed to bubble up from her very core, smiled warmly. "Chloe, darling, wonderful. We're celebrating my daughter's engagement. She's the lovely one blushing over there." Chloe offered a genuine smile to the blushing young woman. Congratulations. What a wonderful occasion. She took their drink orders, a mix of expensive champagne, aged scotch, and artisanal cocktails. Her memory flawless, her hands steady as she recorded the details. Each interaction was met with easygoing appreciation from the table, a stark contrast to the demanding nuances of some other patrons. They were loud, yes, but their energy was infectious, radiating genuine joy. As the evening progressed, Chloe moved with practiced grace, a phantom limb anticipating every need. She'd navigated the intricacies of their multi-course meal, from appetizer to main courses, ensuring each plate arrived at the correct person. Each wine glass was replenished discreetly. She remembered the specific dietary restriction one guest had mentioned, subtly ensuring their dish was prepared accordingly without drawing attention. She anticipated empty bread baskets before they were truly empty, cleared plates with quiet swiftness, and answered questions about the menu with knowledgeable precision. The silver-haired woman whose name Chloe learned was Mrs. Albright watched her with an approving glint in her eyes. "Chloe, you are simply marvelous," she declared at one point, loud enough for half the dining room to hear. "The best service we've had in ages. Absolutely impeccable." Her praise, freely given, felt like a warm balm after Henderson's constant chill. Chloe merely inclined her head, a small, polite smile gracing her lips. "Thank you, Mrs. Albright. It's my pleasure." She was acutely aware of Henderson's presence. He hadn't directly interfered with Table 7, perhaps recognizing their obvious affluence and the potential for a substantial bill, but his gaze, she knew, was a constant prickle on her back, a silent challenge to find a fault. Dessert arrived, followed by coffee and digestives. The celebration was winding down, but the good cheer remained undiminished. Chloe presented the bill on a polished silver tray. Mrs. Albright barely glanced at it before pulling out a slim leather wallet. Her eyes, however, were fixed on Chloe. "Chloe," she began, her voice dropping slightly, though still resonating with warmth. "You've made our evening truly special. Truly." She fumbled with the wallet for a moment, then extracted a thick roll of bills, folded neatly. With a decisive movement, she reached out, her fingers closing around Chloe's hand, and pressed the substantial wad directly into her palm. The crisp paper felt foreign, warm from Mrs. Albright's hand, almost shocking in its density. "This," Mrs. Albright continued, her grip firm for a brief moment, "is just for you, dear. A little something extra for your exceptional service. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her eyes held a knowing glint, as if she sensed the undercurrents of the dining room, or perhaps simply understood the realities of the service industry. Chloe's breath hitched. A tiny gasp caught in her throat. The weight of the money was astonishing. It wasn't just a generous tip, it was a statement. Her fingers instinctively curled around the bills, tucking them into the secure warmth of her palm. "Mrs. Albright, thank you," she managed, her voice a little softer than usual, a genuine flush rising on her cheeks. "That's truly more than generous. Thank you so much." From across the bustling room, near the maitre d' stand, Mr. Henderson had been observing as always. His gaze had been sweeping, analytical, taking in the scene. He had seen Mrs. Albright reach for her wallet, seen her hand move, and then distinctly seen the exchange. He saw the flash of green, the way Mrs. Albright's fingers pressed the money into Chloe's hand, saw Chloe's momentary surprise, quickly masked, and the way her fingers closed protectively around the cash. A subtle shift occurred in Henderson's posture. His already narrow eyes seemed to contract further, focusing with an almost predatory intensity on Chloe's hand, even after she had discreetly lowered it to her side. The slight, almost imperceptible lift of his chin indicated a new calculation, a tightening of his internal gears. The warmth of the generous table suddenly felt like a beacon, drawing an unwelcome chill from across the room. The confrontation, the persistent clatter of plates and the hushed murmur of contented diners gradually receded as Chloe traversed the labyrinthine back-of-house corridors. The rhythmic pulse of the industrial dishwasher offered a stark counterpoint to the distant peals of laughter emanating from the main dining room. Tucked securely in her apron pocket, Mrs. Albright's folded $20 bill represented a small but notable triumph in an otherwise unrelenting shift. The crisp paper's warmth was a tangible acknowledgement of her diligent efforts, a silent testament to service that had exceeded a mere expectation. Her gait, typically brisk and purposeful, slowed as she neared the narrow passage leading to the staff break room. From the deeper recesses near the linen closet, a dark form detached itself, abruptly obstructing her path. Mr. Henderson, his imposing figure filling the confined space, leaned against the wall, arms crossed, radiating a predatory stillness. His customary impeccably tailored suit seemed to absorb what faint light dared to penetrate the hallway, rendering him almost a part of the oppressive gloom. "Chloe, a word, if you please." His voice, usually a smooth, authoritative purr in the dining room, was conspicuously flat here, stripped of its public charm. It was a sound that sent an unsettling shiver down Chloe's arms. She halted, a polite, unreadable expression settling on her features. "Mr. Henderson?" Her tone remained neutral, betraying none of the sudden unease that knotted her stomach. The already cramped hallway suddenly felt suffocating. The mingled scents of stale cleaning products and something subtly metallic hung heavy in the air. He disengaged from the wall, taking a single, deliberate step closer. The movement felt less like an approach and more like a deliberate closing in. I couldn't help but notice the generosity of Table 7 this evening. His eyes, like chips of polished obsidian, flicked to her apron pocket, a silent, pointed accusation. There was no warmth, no commendation in his gaze, only a cold, calculating appraisal. Chloe met his stare without a flicker of hesitation. "Mrs. Albright was very pleased with the service, sir." She maintained an even cadence, a conscious effort to project calm despite the escalating tension. Her fingers subtly brushed against the $20 bill through the apron fabric. A thin, humorless smile stretched Henderson's lips. "Indeed, exceptional service, I'm sure. And exceptional tips, by the looks of it." He paused, allowing the implication to thicken the already charged air. "You know, Chloe, the Gilded Spoon operates on a principle of communal effort. We all contribute to the guest's experience." Chloe's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. She knew the restaurant's tip policy intimately. Personal gratuities, especially those given directly and explicitly to a server, were hers. This was a direct personal reward, distinct from the standard service charge or pooled tips. "Yes, sir, and all communal tips are, of course, accounted for in the daily distribution. My declaration reflects that." Henderson's smile remained fixed, yet his eyes hardened further, losing their last vestige of civility. "Ah, but this wasn't a communal tip, was it? This was extra, a bonus, one might say, and bonuses, dear Chloe, are best shared. To foster team spirit, to ensure everyone feels valued, even those who weren't directly serving Mrs. Albright's table." His voice, though outwardly calm, now possessed an edge, like a razor-sharp blade sheathed in velvet. The unspoken threat was unmistakable. This was not a request, but a demand, thinly cloaked as a philosophical discussion on the workplace harmony. Chloe felt a familiar slow burn of indignation begin to simmer beneath her composed exterior. This $20 represented more than mere currency. It was recognition, a small affirmation of her worth in a demanding environment. To relinquish it under false pretenses felt like a profound violation. "With all due respect, Mr. Henderson," Chloe began, her voice quiet but firm, a stark contrast to the maitre d's increasingly clipped tone. "Restaurant policy, as outlined in the employee handbook, states that personal tips given directly to a server are at the discretion of that server. They are not part of the general tip pool or subject to redistribution." She recited the clause with a precision that suggested deep familiarity. His eyes narrowed, and the last vestige of that unsettling smile vanished. The air in the narrow corridor seemed to crackle with an unspoken animosity. Policy, Chloe, can be interpreted, especially when a certain individual consistently outperforms their peers in attracting such personal gratuities. The emphasis he placed on personal was laced with a sneer, implying something illicit or unfair about her success. Some might call it unfair, unbalanced. It breeds resentment. "I simply perform my duties to the best of my ability, sir," Chloe replied, her chin lifting slightly. Her patience, a deep well she usually drew from, was beginning to run shallow. And Mrs. Albright's tip was a direct acknowledgement of that. She specifically requested it be for me. Henderson's jaw tightened. The controlled veneer of his politeness was finally cracking, revealing the irritation simmering beneath. Are you refusing, Chloe? The question was sharp, a direct challenge. His voice was no longer flat, but held a dangerous undertone, a distinct warning. The silence that followed stretched, punctuated only by the distant thrum of the kitchen. Chloe looked him directly in the eye, her gaze steady, unwavering. I am simply upholding the established rules of this establishment, Mr. Henderson. Rules I believe apply to everyone. A muscle twitched in his cheek. He took another step, closing the remaining distance between them, forcing Chloe to instinctively take a small step back until her shoulders brushed the cold, unyielding wall. The scent of his expensive cologne, usually pleasant, now felt cloying, oppressive. His face, usually a mask of suave professionalism, was now etched with undisguised annoyance, a dark shadow flickering in his eyes. The $20 in her pocket suddenly felt monumentally heavy, scattered dignity. The pleasant hum of the dining room seemed to amplify the silence in the narrow hallway. Henderson's smile, stretched thin and brittle, finally fractured. His eyes, once merely predatory, now held a glint of genuine malice. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a dangerous register, a whisper that vibrated with suppressed fury. You think you're so smart, don't you, Chloe? Playing by the rules. Let me tell you something about these rules. Before Chloe could react, before the words even fully registered, Henderson's hand shot out. It wasn't a grab, not exactly. It was a violent, dismissive swipe. His fingers snagged the folded bills she still clutched, tearing them from her grasp, with a sudden jarring force that left her palm stinging and empty. The crisp green paper, the tangible proof of her diligent effort, fluttered for a breathless second, suspended in the air. Then, with a contemptuous flick of his wrist, Henderson flung the money. It wasn't tossed, it was cast away as if it were refuse. The $20 bill, still folded, spun like a tiny green bird, followed by the smaller denominations, two fives, three singles, scattering in a chaotic arc. They didn't just fall. They danced, then skittered across the high gloss, dark wood floor of the main dining area, each bill a bright, humiliating flag against the polished surface. The sound was sickeningly distinct, a soft, papery rustle, followed by the almost imperceptible clink of a few loose coins, a quarter, two dimes, a nickel, that had been inadvertently swept up in the manager's violent action. A collective gasp, a ripple of shocked intakes of breath, spread through the room. The elegant clinking of silverware against porcelain, the murmur of conversation, the delicate tinkle of crystal, all died abruptly. A sudden profound hush descended, heavy and suffocating. Every eye in the Gilded Spoon, from the couple celebrating anniversaries to the business associates sealing deals, swiveled towards the spectacle unfolding near the kitchen entrance. Chloe stood frozen, her eyes wide, locked on the scattered money. The $20 bill lay near the base of a potted fern, a stark green against the verdant leaves. A $5 bill had landed perilously close to the pristine white tablecloth of Table 7, while the singles were dispersed like discarded playing cards near the high-backed chairs of Table 9. The coins, small and glinting, rested almost mockingly in the reflective sheen of the wood, each a tiny mirror reflecting her public degradation. Her chest tightened, a cold knot of shame and rage. Her cheeks burned, not from exertion, but from the searing heat of humiliation. It felt as though a physical blow had landed, not just on her person, but on her very soul. This wasn't just about the money, it was about her dignity, her effort, her worth, also carelessly flung away. Henderson's face, a mask of cold satisfaction, watched her. There was no apology, no flicker of regret in his gaze, only a perverse triumph, a chilling affirmation that he had asserted his dominance, shattered her defiance. There, he sneered, his voice cutting through the silence like a razor. Let's see how much that personal tip is worth now. The words were a whip crack, breaking Chloe from her stunned immobility. A tremor ran through her hands, still tingling from the violent snatch, clenched into fists, then slowly unfurled. She felt the hot sting behind her eyelids, the prickle of tears that threatened to overflow. But she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Not here, not now. Slowly, deliberately, Chloe sank to her knees. The movement was stiff, mechanical, each muscle protesting the public act. The starched fabric of her uniform tightened across her knees as she knelt on the polished floor, the rough texture of the wood grain pressing into her skin through the thin material. Her gaze, fixed on the dispersed bills, was unwavering. She began to gather them. Her fingers, usually nimble and swift, trembled slightly as she reached for the nearest single. The crisp paper felt alien, tainted by the way it had been treated. Each bill she picked up felt heavier than it should, burdened with the weight of the moment. The quarter, cool and smooth, nestled in her palm, a stark contrast to the burning shame in her heart. The silence in the dining room remained profound, almost reverent. No one dared to speak. No one dared to move. They watched, a silent jury, their gazes a palpable pressure on Chloe's back. She could feel their eyes, 100 pinpricks scrutinizing her humiliation. The air was thick with unspoken judgments, with pity, with discomfort. At table 7, Mr. Kim, who had observed the entire interaction from the moment Henderson first approached Chloe in the hallway, sat perfectly still. His chopsticks, paused mid-air above a bowl of steaming broth, remained motionless. His eyes, usually impassive, held a deep, troubled glint. He watched Chloe, kneeling on the floor, gathering the scattered remnants of her hard work, and a profound disquiet settled in his usually calm demeanor. He had seen many forms of disrespect in his life, but this particular act, so public, so deliberately demeaning, struck a chord. The manager, Henderson, stood like a predator surveying his prey, a smirk playing on his lips. Mr. Kim's gaze sharpened, a cold fire beginning to kindle in their depths. The quiet man at table 7 had seen enough. The observer rises. The clatter of coins on the polished hardwood floor had been a jarring punctuation mark in the otherwise hushed hum of the gilded spoon. Mr. Kim, a man whose presence usually receded into the background, felt the sound resonate deep within him. His eyes, dark and unblinking, had tracked Henderson's every predatory move, from the snaking hand that snatched at Chloe's apron to the vicious arc of his arm as he flung her meager earnings. He watched Chloe, a silent tableau of resilience, drop to her knees, her back ramrod straight, gathering the scattered silver and greenbacks. The air in the dining room, usually thick with the murmur of polite conversation and the gentle clinking of cutlery, now hung heavy, stifled by an invisible blanket of collective shock and shame. Henderson, a smug smirk twisting his lips, stood over Chloe like a victor surveying his spoils. His chest puffed out, a caricature of authority, as if the public degradation of a young woman was a testament to his power rather than his depravity. Mr. Kim's gaze, a laser beam of quiet intensity, remained fixed on the maitre d', a deep-seated disquiet churning within him. He noted the slight tremor in Henderson's hand, the almost imperceptible tick at the corner of his eye, signs of a man whose bravado was a thin veneer over a core of insecurity and malice. The patrons at nearby tables, initially frozen in a state of mortified disbelief, began to stir, a low ripple of murmurs spreading through the room. Forks paused mid-air, wine glasses remained untouched. But Mr. Kim remained motionless, his attention unwavering, a silent, formidable statue at table 7. The scent of roasted duck and truffle oil, once a comforting aroma, now felt cloying, suffocating in the charged atmosphere. Then with a slow, deliberate grace that belied his age, Mr. Kim began to move. His right hand, gnarled and surprisingly strong, reached for the edge of his chair. He pushed back, not with a sudden, attention-grabbing scrape, but with a controlled, almost imperceptible slide across the floor. The subtle friction of wood on polished wood was the only sound, yet it seemed to echo in the sudden vacuum of the room. The chair yielded, moving a few inches, then a few more, creating just enough space for him to rise. His actions were measured, unhurried, as if he were engaged in a complex private ritual. He pushed the chair back further, a soft rasp against the floorboards, until it was several feet behind him. The sound, though quiet, was enough to break the spell for a few of the nearest diners. Their eyes, wide with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, flickered from Chloe on the floor to the rising figure of Mr. Kim. Chloe, still kneeling, had just scooped up the last coin. She felt a subtle shift in the air, A minute change in the room's oppressive energy, a flicker of movement in her peripheral vision drew her gaze, her eyes still stinging with unshed tears of indignation, met Mr. Kim's. He was now fully upright, a man of average height, yet possessing an unexpected gravitas. His suit, usually unremarkable, now seemed to hang on him with a new, almost formidable dignity. His face, typically placid, was devoid of any overt emotion, yet a dangerous intensity simmered beneath the surface of his dark eyes. It was a look that held no anger, no disgust, but rather a chilling, unyielding resolve. His hands, which moments before had been idly resting on the table, now hung loosely at his sides, coiled and ready. A few of the younger staff members, who had been huddled near the kitchen entrance, exchanging nervous glances, now noticed Mr. Kim. Their hushed whispers died on their lips. The busboy, mid-wipe of a table, froze, his cloth suspended in the air. The hostess, a usually unflappable young woman, visibly stiffened, her smile faltering as she tracked Mr. Kim's silent assent. A collective, almost imperceptible intake of breath rippled through the room. Henderson, still basking in his perceived victory, finally turned his attention to the subtle disturbance. His eyes, narrowing, landed on Mr. Kim. The maitre d' registered the man's unblinking stare, the quiet authority in his posture. For a fleeting moment, the smug confidence in Henderson's eyes wavered, replaced by a flicker of something akin to unease. He dismissed it quickly, though, attributing it to the general discomfort he had successfully sown. Mr. Kim remained silent, his gaze unwavering, fixed on Henderson. He took a single, deliberate step forward, then another, his movements fluid and purposeful. The quiet dignity of his presence, the unnerving stillness of his expression, began to chip away at the maitre d's composure. The air, already charged, now throbbed with an unspoken tension, a silent promise of unfolding events. The observer had risen, and the atmosphere of the Gilded Spoon, along with the fate of its predatory manager, was about to irrevocably change. A quiet threat. The clatter of a dropped fork echoed through the sudden silence of the Gilded Spoon, a sound sharp and out of place in the hushed reverence that had taken hold. Every eye, from the busboy frozen mid-sweep to the couple discreetly whispering in a corner booth, was fixed on Mr. Kim. He moved with a quiet, deliberate grace, each step a testament to an unseen power, a ripple in the air that spoke of profound stillness before a storm. Henderson, still basking in the glow of his petty triumph, felt a prickle of unease as Kim approached. He knew Mr. Kim was a regular, a man of quiet habits and impeccable taste, but the intensity radiating from him now was something entirely new, entirely unsettling. "Mr. Kim," Henderson began, his voice losing some of its earlier swagger, a note of forced politeness creeping in. "Is everything to your satisfaction?" He managed a weak, ingratiating smile, but it felt stiff, unnatural. Mr. Kim stopped a foot from Henderson, his gaze, usually placid, now held the depth of a winter ocean. It was a look that didn't demand attention, but commanded it, drawing Henderson in, stripping away his veneer of authority. "Everything," Mr. Kim replied, his voice a low thrum that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. It was not a question, not an affirmation, but a statement of absolute fact. "Except," he continued, his eyes briefly flicking to the scattered currency on the pristine white tile, then to Chloe, who stood rigid, her face a mask of carefully constructed composure. "This display," Henderson's chest tightened. The casual dismissal in Kim's tone, the subtle emphasis on display, made his earlier actions feel tawdry, childish. "Just a minor disciplinary matter, Mr. Kim. Employee relations, you understand?" He tried to wave it off with a dismissive hand gesture, but his arm felt heavy, his fingers fumbling. He glanced around, expecting the usual nods of subservience from his staff, but found only averted gazes and stiff shoulders. Even the usually sycophantic barman was polishing a glass with an unnecessary vigor, his back pointedly turned. A cold dread began to seep into Henderson's carefully constructed confidence. "Disciplinary, Mr." Kim's voice dropped another notch, becoming a silken whisper that was more menacing than any shout. "Or predatory?" The word hung in the air, a venomous indictment. Henderson flinched, the blood draining from his face. He opened his mouth to protest, to deny, but no sound emerged. His mind raced, searching for an angle, a way to regain control, but Mr. Kim's presence was a suffocating blanket. "I have dined here for many years, Mr. Henderson," Mr. Kim continued, his gaze unwavering, fixed on Henderson's now pale face. "I have always appreciated the quality of the food, the ambiance, and the discretion." He paused, allowing the implication to settle. "But I have also I observe a great deal." His eyes, dark and fathomless, held Henderson captive. "I have observed your methods, your inclinations." Henderson's mind spun. What had this man observed? How much did he know? The memory of whispered complaints, of hushed threats, of the way he made certain waitresses feel uncomfortable, flashed through his mind. Was it possible this quiet, unassuming man had been watching all along? The thought sent a jolt of genuine fear through him. "I find myself displeased," Mr. Kim said, the word displeased delivered with such quiet force it felt like a physical blow. "When a place I frequent, a place I consider a refuge, becomes tainted by such vulgarity." He gestured subtly to Chloe, then to the money on the floor. The exploitation of a diligent employee, the public humiliation, it reflects poorly on the establishment, and by extension, on those who frequent it. Henderson swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. He tried to meet Mr. Kim's gaze, but found he couldn't. He shifted his weight nervously, suddenly aware of the oppressive silence, the collective breath held by everyone in the room. This wasn't just a disgruntled customer. This was something far more dangerous. "I have connections, Mr. Henderson," Mr. Kim said, his voice still low, almost conversational, yet each word was a hammer blow. "Connections that value integrity, discretion, and the proper handling of situations." He took a slow, deliberate step closer. "I would be very disappointed if certain irregularities were to come to light. Irregularities that could impact your professional standing, your future." The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air, chilling Henderson to the bone. It wasn't a loud declaration, but a quiet, surgical incision into his deepest fears. He saw the glances exchanged between his staff, not of pity, but of a grim, knowing satisfaction. They knew, they understood. And suddenly, Henderson understood too. This quiet man wasn't just a rich patron. He was a force, an undeniable presence, with roots far deeper and wider than Henderson could have ever imagined. His empire of petty tyrannies was crumbling, not with a bang, but with the soft, dangerous whisper of a man who held all the cards. An unexpected offer? The oppressive silence in the gilded spoon, punctuated only by the distant clatter from the kitchen, stretched tautly. Henderson, a study in flustered defeat, remained rooted to the spot, his face a mottled canvas of shame and barely suppressed fury. His gaze, however, refused to meet Mr. Kim's, instead darting around the polished floor as if seeking an escape route through the pristine tiles. Mr. Kim, however, had entirely dismissed Henderson. His attention, now a laser-focused beam, shifted to Chloe. He reached into the inner pocket of his finely tailored jacket, a movement so smooth and deliberate it seemed almost theatrical. From within, he produced a slim leather wallet, its rich scent of aged leather subtly reaching Chloe even from several feet away. With unhurried precision, he extracted a crisp stack of $100 bills, meticulously counted, and then folded them into a neat rectangle. He extended his hand, not towards the scattered coins and crumpled singles on the floor, but directly to Chloe. "Miss Davis," he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble that seemed to fill the sudden void left by Henderson's sputtered retreat. "This is for you, a small token, perhaps, for the inconvenience you've endured, and as an apology for the disrespect shown in this establishment today." His eyes, dark and profound, held hers, conveying a sincerity that bypassed the need for flowery language. There was no pity in his gaze, only a deep, unsettling respect. Chloe stared at the money, then at Mr. Kim's outstretched hand. The stack of bills was substantial, far more than a night's tips. Even a good night's. It felt like a small fortune. Her initial reaction was a familiar reflex to refuse, to insist on earning her keep, to maintain her quiet dignity by rejecting charity. Her pride, a stubborn companion through years of barely making it, bristled. She had never taken handouts, never accepted anything she hadn't worked for. The heat of humiliation from Henderson's earlier actions still warmed her cheeks. But this was different. Mr. Kim did not withdraw his hand. He simply held it steady, an unwavering pillar of calm. His expression remained unreadable, yet there was an undercurrent of expectation in his stillness, a quiet demand that she accept, not for his sake, but for her own. It was a gesture that transcended mere compensation. It was an acknowledgement of her worth, a silent rebuke to the indignity she had suffered. Chloe's gaze flickered from the money to his eyes. She saw not condescension, but a profound understanding, a recognition of the quiet strength she possessed, the very strength Henderson had tried to break. In that moment, the act of acceptance transformed from receiving charity to reclaiming something that had been stolen: her peace, her dignity, her right to be treated with respect. It wasn't about the money itself, it was about the intention behind it, the silent affirmation of her humanity. A barely perceptible tremor ran through her as she slowly reached out. Her fingers, still tingling from the residual heat of the coffee cup she'd just held, brushed against the crisp paper. The bills were cool, substantial in her palm. The weight of them felt reassuring, a tangible counterpoint to the lightness of injustice. As her fingers closed around the stack, a spark ignited within her, a feeling she hadn't recognized in a long time: empowerment. It wasn't a loud, aggressive power, but a quiet, resolute one. The kind that settled deep in her bones and whispered, "You are seen. You are valued, mister." Kim's hand slowly retracted, a faint, almost imperceptible nod of approval accompanying the movement. His lips curved into a subtle, knowing smile, a brief flash of warmth in his otherwise stoic demeanor. He didn't say another word, but the silent communication that passed between them was more potent than any dialogue. It was an unspoken pact, a shared understanding that transcended their brief acquaintance. He had offered more than money, he had offered validation, and Chloe, by accepting, had claimed her rightful place, not as a victim, but as an individual worthy of respect. The scattered coins and crumpled bills on the pristine floor now seemed insignificant, almost an afterthought. The real transaction had just occurred, a quiet exchange of respect and dignity that had shifted the very atmosphere of the Gilded Spoon. Henderson, still frozen in his tableau of defeat, seemed to shrink further into himself, a shadow in the wake of this unexpected quiet revolution. The ringing in Chloe's ears was no longer the echo of Henderson's harsh words, but the faint, triumphant hum of a new beginning. She tucked the money carefully into her apron pocket, a silent promise to herself to carry this newfound strength forward. New beginnings. The scent of stale coffee and disinfectant usually clung to the morning air at the Gilded Spoon, but today something else permeated the atmosphere, a nervous, almost electric buzz. Chloe arrived for her shift, her steps lighter than they had been in months, a subtle hum of anticipation thrumming beneath her skin. She found Maria, a veteran hostess with eyes that missed nothing, meticulously polishing a stack of menus, her movements a little too deliberate. "Morning, Maria," Chloe offered, heading for the staff locker room. Maria glanced up, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Morning, Chloe. You hear the news?" Chloe paused, feigning ignorance, though her heart gave a little skip. "News?" "Henderson," Maria whispered, leaning in conspiratorially. "Fired, just like that. Came in this morning, cleaned out his office, gone by 8. A quiet wave of satisfaction washed over Chloe. It wasn't the chaotic, explosive dismissal she might have imagined, but rather a swift surgical removal. No fanfare, no lingering drama, just a clean break. It felt decisive. "Really?" Chloe said, allowing a flicker of surprise to cross her face. "Who's managing now?" "Some regional director from corporate is filling in for a bit," Maria said, returning to her menus. "But word is they're looking for someone new, someone with a better customer-focused approach, and apparently Her emphasis on the corporate jargon was laced with thinly veiled amusement. Throughout the morning, the whispers continued, a low murmur among the staff as they prepared for the lunch rush. Servers traded theories, busboys exchanged knowing glances, and even the usually stoic chefs seemed to move with a renewed, almost buoyant energy. The oppressive shadow Henderson had cast over the restaurant had lifted, replaced by an unfamiliar lightness, a sense of possibility. Chloe found herself smiling more easily, engaging with customers with genuine warmth. Unburdened by the constant vigilance Henderson's presence had demanded, the tips she earned today felt entirely her own, untainted by the threat of appropriation. Later that afternoon, after her shift, Chloe stopped at the local credit union. She needed to transfer some funds, mostly her rent money, and deposit the tips from the day. As the teller, a young woman with a friendly face, processed her transaction, Chloe's eyes drifted to the digital display. The numbers seemed to swim for a moment, then solidify into an impossible figure. "Excuse me," Chloe said, her voice barely a whisper. Is that right?" The teller peered at the screen. "Yes, ma'am. Your current balance is, let's see, $100,342.75. She smiled. "Looks like you hit the jackpot?" Chloe felt the blood drain from her face. $100,000, not a lottery win, not an inheritance she didn't know about. It could only be one thing: Mr. Kim. His quiet promise, his unwavering gaze, he had meant every word. He hadn't given her charity. He had delivered on an act of profound restitution. Her dignity, her worth, quantified in return. A wave of intense emotion, a mix of gratitude, disbelief, and a fierce sense of empowerment threatened to overwhelm her. She managed a weak "thank you" before excusing herself and stepping out into the late afternoon sun. The world suddenly vibrant, shimmering with newfound potential. The money sat in her account, a silent testament to Mr. Kim's influence and a powerful catalyst for change. For days, Chloe walked on air, the weight of the past finally lifting. She researched programs, visited campuses, and meticulously planned her next steps. The nursing school brochure, once a mere fantasy tucked away in her mind, now felt tangible, real. One crisp Tuesday morning, she found herself walking across a manicured campus, the scent of freshly cut grass mingling with the faint aroma of antiseptic from a nearby building. The admissions office buzzed with activity, but Chloe felt remarkably calm. She filled out the forms with a steady hand, her signature firm and resolute. She paid the initial tuition and fees, the numbers on the receipt no longer daunting, but rather a symbol of her investment in herself. The woman at the counter handed her a student ID card, a small rectangle of plastic that felt heavier than gold in her palm. "Welcome to the Collegiate School of Nursing, Miss Davis," the woman said, her smile genuine. "We're excited to have you." Chloe looked down at her new ID, her name printed clearly beneath a recent photo. Chloe Davis, student nurse. The words resonated deep within her, a melody of hope and determination. This wasn't just a new beginning, it was a reclamation, a defiant stride toward the future she had always dreamed of, finally within her grasp. The gilded spoon, Henderson, the struggle. It all receded, becoming a distant echo against the clear, bright promise of what lay ahead. The confident patron, weeks later, the familiar chime above the gilded spoon's door heralded a transformed Chloe. Gone was the server's uniform. In its place, a twilight-hued dress flowed with an easy grace she rarely indulged. Her hair, usually confined to a practical ponytail, now cascaded in soft waves, catching the chandelier's gleam. The comforting aroma of roasted garlic and lemon still perfumed the air, but tonight it was merely a backdrop, not a constant echo of her past. She surveyed the room with a confident sweep, taking in the hushed conversations, the clinking of silverware, and the soft jazz murmur. Her gaze settled on Mr. Kim, seated at his usual corner table, a book open, a half-empty teacup at his side. He appeared just as she remembered him, unassuming, a quiet observer, yet radiating an almost imperceptible composure. A new hostess approached. "Table for one?" she inquired politely. Chloe offered a genuine, unburdened smile. "Yes, please. Somewhere I can observe." Her voice, clear and resonant, held none of its former wariness. She followed the hostess to a small window table, offering a dual view of the street outside and, more importantly, a direct line of sight to Mr. Kim. Settling into the plush velvet chair, she allowed herself a moment to simply exist, no longer defined by the relentless pace of service or a predatory manager's watchful eye. The unfolding of the crisp linen napkin felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. The menu, substantial in her hands, was no longer a task blueprint, but an invitation to a leisurely meal. She ordered sparkling water with lemon, a simple choice for a complex moment. As the hostess departed, Chloe's eyes drifted back to Mr. Kim, still engrossed in his reading. She felt no urgency to approach, no need for an immediate grand declaration. Their understanding transcended words, a silent conversation already concluded, culminating in the astonishing discovery in her bank account, the $100,000. The figure still vibrated in her mind, a tangible manifestation of unexpected kindness, representing more than just money. It was freedom, validation, a clear path forward. She had wasted no time. The online nursing program application, her long-deferred dream, had been submitted that very evening. And the acceptance letter, a neat official document, now resided in her purse, a tangible emblem of her new beginning. A young man she recognized from her own time behind the bar delivered her water. He offered a shy smile. "Chloe, is that really you?" She returned his smile, warmer now. "It is. Just enjoying a night out." He nodded, awe in his eyes. "It's different here now. Much better." He glanced around conspiratorially. "Since Henderson left, it's like a whole new place." "I'm glad to hear that," Chloe replied, her gaze briefly flickering towards Mr. Kim. The server followed her glance, then back to her, a flicker of dawning realization in his eyes. He quickly retreated, sensing a private moment unfolding. Finally, Mr. Kim closed his book. He stretched, a slow, deliberate movement, then lifted his head. His dark, intelligent eyes swept across the dining room, just as Chloe's had done, and then they met hers. There was no surprise in his gaze, just a calm acknowledgement, a look that held volumes, a silent exchange of gratitude offered and a promise fulfilled. In that moment, the noisy restaurant faded into a soft blur. It was just Chloe and Mr. Kim, two individuals bound by an extraordinary unspoken understanding. Chloe raised her glass of sparkling water, a subtle, elegant gesture, a silent toast. Mr. Kim's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, a small private upturn that softened the edges of his usually impassive face. He nodded almost imperceptibly, a simple, dignified response that conveyed everything. He didn't raise his teacup, didn't make a grand gesture. He simply accepted her unspoken thanks, a quiet grace that resonated with Chloe's own understated strength. The weight of her past, the indignities, the struggle, all seemed to dissipate in that shared glance. It was a release, a final exhale. She was no longer the server enduring the whims of a cruel manager. She was a woman on the precipice of a new life, empowered and finally free. The Gilded Spoon, once a cage, was now merely a restaurant, a place where a chapter of her life had closed and another, far more promising one, had silently begun. She ordered a light dinner, savoring each vibrant bite, untainted by stress or resentment. She watched Mr. Kim as he opened his book once more, a quiet sentinel in the corner. His presence was a reminder that sometimes the most profound changes arrive not with a fanfare, but with the quiet, discerning eye of a confident patron.